Political napalm. Let's get right into it. So, this week has been a really fun week. And by fun, I'm going to put air quotes around it. For one, Donald J. Trump. It's Tuesday, and it already has been quite a week for this man, and things that are going on in his life that I think he'd rather forget about. But Lord knows nobody's letting him forget about this. So, the week starts off with Joey Tapioca in New York, for the E. Jean Carroll case, totally not knowing a very common literary reference, and then trying to use that against the judge and making a large idiot out of himself. And also trying to file for a 5 o'clock a.m. in the morning dismissal through a letter. Now, it is not unheard of for lawyers to attempt to ask for a mistrial while not in court. It happens. However, this is currently taking place in a federal court. In a federal court, there is far more court decorum, so to speak, going on than there is in a state level court, which is where Joey Tapioca does most of his loudmouth Sopranos kind of imitation. I won't refer to him as my cousin Vinny anymore, because that would actually be an insult to my cousin Vinny. And of course, in that movie, he was the good guy. Tapioca is not, and has his own problems going on right now that Jack Smith has said. Actually, I'm not too sure if it's Jack Smith. One of the other judges has said, you need to turn over all your documents in the Stormy Daniels case because it looks like you have an apparent conflict of interest to represent Trump now when you initially had your ties to Stormy Daniels way back when. Not a very good look for Joey over here. Not a good start to his week along with Trump's. But so here's what was the deal with not understanding the literary reference. E. Jean Carroll said, in the past, all men should get shuffled off to Montana and get retrained. And E. Jean Carroll says, well, that was satire. It was so over the top and so clearly not said with any realistic malicious intent, or malicious intent to actually have the action happen. It was satire. It was huge comedy. And it references back Jonathan Swift's A Modest Proposal. If you're unfamiliar with what the Modest Proposal is, it was a book from the 1790s that proposed Irish people should get out of their poverty and low wealth status by selling their children to the rich British people to be eaten. So you have not 1790s, 1720s. A little off over there. Had a dyslexic moment. It is, the Modest Proposal has taken on a life beyond the book. It is the many, many decades equivalent of what we would now call a meme. When you say a modest proposal, it is something that you immediately come to understand the circumstances of, and that the circumstances are a very over-the-top, clearly unrealistic piece of satire that nobody can get behind because it is so abhorrent it needs to be comedy or parody. It is similar to things that have taken on a life of their own after the event has happened, things like A Fatal Attraction, when you reference a fatal attraction, you don't necessarily mean the movie or even the original version Fatal Attraction, which Clint Eastwood had directed. I believe it was his first movie that he directed. Has Misty in the title of it. It is, you're not just referencing those events, but you are referencing the life that has happened post movie, post book, how it has kind of become a phrase that encapsulates something that people think of when they hear the phrase. You know, a basic instinct, an indecent proposal, a modest proposal, a fatal attraction. These are all the many decades old version of now what you could call a meme. If you look up Sonic the Hedgehog or Spooderman, that is the modern equivalent of what is going on with Jonathan Swift's Modest Proposal. Just things that you sort of immediately understand the scenario of, even if you're not necessarily referencing the exact picture or movie or book, etc. So Tacopina said Kaplan exhibited bias because he understood the literary reference, and he himself, Tacopina, didn't understand that it was a joke and what the satire meant by referencing Jonathan Swift's Modest Proposal. It's clearly didn't work, as it was a rather pathetic attempt at getting something thrown out, that all that it does is it just shows the man's own stupidity. He then came back, he read it, sort of, and this is where there is sort of a parallel to My Cousin Vinny. He went home and then read it and then came back and said it doesn't address the exact same matter of her own book and everything, and tried to say, but no, it doesn't really apply. It means, again, the situation of A Modest Proposal just continued to go over his head. He couldn't play it out to how it was referencing. He was just taking it so excessively literally that he just embarrassed himself further. So once again, when Trump said he knows the best people, he hires the best people, he has the best people, he is the best people, clearly, again, reality strikes, and it's not the case. Here, he actually demanded a mistrial, saying that the court has mischaracterized the evidence in the favor of the plaintiff, bolstered the testimony of the plaintiff, allowed plaintiff to testify that the defendant had two tables of lawyers at trial, while prohibiting defendant from fairly clarifying the record by showing the plaintiff had a comparable amount of lawyers. So what that was is that E. Jean Carroll said under oath on record that when her event happened, and the whole reason why we're here with this is she was warned, don't go after Trump. Trump will use an army of lawyers to beat you down and create so many problems for you. When this was brought up in court, and E. Jean Carroll said, and exactly, here it is, right in front of me, she not only was referencing the numbers and the tables full of Trump lawyers, she was also referencing their attempted beatdown. So this is what she was referencing, and Tapioca is trying to get that thrown out as a mistrial by saying he wasn't allowed to bring up the fact that she had a table of lawyers too. Why is it so bad that the Trump side does? that's not exactly her full point. Her point was that she was warned to watch what she does because this eventual reality, this timeline, would be the one that winds up coming true. And she's pointing it out that this is exactly what he said would happen. That is the point of her statement, not the fact that they each had 10 lawyers apiece, so it's fair and everything. She's not saying it's unfair that he has these lawyers. She's saying that it was called out that he would have these lawyers, and it is playing out exactly. So this is where the judge, Kaplan, is like, this is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not even going to make a comment on this. Your motion for mistrial is denied. It is dismissed. But all right, let's go ahead and continue. Continuously sustain improper argumentative objections of the plaintiff's counsel as to questions using well-established and accepted looping method of cross-examination. What was going on there is that Tapioca was testifying, and I mean by testifying in the biblical sense. He was soapboxing and grandstanding without an eventual point. He was not asking questions. He was trying to do essentially an opening statement or closing statement thing, which is a one-way set of communications. It is literally, I speak, you listen. When he was putting Agent Carroll on cross, it is supposed to be a two-way conversation. He is supposed to ask a question that she is supposed to answer. Instead, he's just like, so you would have us believe that in the middle of Bergdorf's on 7 o'clock on a busy day, nobody's going to see you. There was no cameras recording you. He was going to be able to get away with pushing you into a dressing room that was small and blah, blah, blah. And it was objection. You're testifying, you're grandstanding, you're soapboxing. Ask a question. Sit there and say, do you expect the court to believe that at 7 o'clock on a busy Friday night in Bergdorf Goodman's that this could happen and nobody would hear anything about it? And then she gets to answer and talk about the circumstances. He was grandstanding. So that's what the judge was calling him out on. And Tapioca's like, I don't get it. That's not fair. I'm not allowed to make my point. The point is, you're in a federal court. You're supposed to mind your P's and Q's, keep with the proper federal court decorum, and do things the right way. Ask a question and save this kind of crap for closing statement. When he gets to do the infamous movie thing of walking in front of the jury and doing the Tapioca version of, you tell me it takes shorter to cook grits on your stove than anywhere else on this planet. He has to have a question if he's doing it on cross or save it for a closing statement. And that's what he was getting smacked down on. All right, so continuing, permitted the testimony of Natasha Stoyanov without any voir dire of the witness, which is clear that her testimony does not fit in with the requirements of a statute and should be excluded, alluded to the potential use of relevant United States statutes as a form of remedy beyond which they might be available from the court based on the defendant's son, Eric Trump, making completely truthful and non-prejudicial statements about Reid Hoffman's financing of the plaintiff's litigation. This is where the gag order should have been imposed on Trump and his family. There was clearly motivated social media posts that were going on from those in Trump's orbit about aging Carroll while the case was happening. While they typically request that jurors avoid social media and news and outside sources so as not to be tainted, it is commonplace that you should not be doing the tainting yourself, or people within your circle shouldn't even be doing the tainting, attempting to defame her further by slamming her while the court is hearing the case is not a good thing to do. You should instruct the jurors to avoid all kinds of media so as they won't be exposed to it, but it shouldn't be done to begin with. So anyway, Tapioca's motions were absolutely balled up and thrown in the incinerator, and court proceeded as usual. Meanwhile, the Orange Numpty, who declined to show up for this trial, stating that New York should not have to bear the burden and expense of him coming there for another court hearing and day after day and millions of dollars and protection and closing streets and blah, blah, blah. New York said, no, absolutely, get over here. We got you. It's all covered. It's good. You did this just recently. Why don't you come on back? Do it again. So he said, no, I won't do it. I won't put you guys through that undue burden. I'm not going to show up. It is my belief, and this is not a fact, but it is my belief that the reason why he chose not to show up is so that he could not be put on the stand under oath to tell his side of the story, which may eventually run into proof debunking his side of it, thereby creating a situation of perjury for him, lying to the courts. That's my personal belief in the matter. He has shown that he has no issues throwing people out of the nest to fight his battles and then throw them out of his circle and no longer support them. He's done this with cities that he didn't pay for the rallies. He didn't pay for Sydney. He didn't pay for Rudy. There's just so many cases of backstabbing when it comes to him that I don't know why people would even bother taking up his cases, especially Tapioca, who may have a conflict of interest in this case with the Stormy Daniels stuff. I don't know how he finds work, but people aren't falling for his crap. They aren't listening to him. Outside of Eileen Cannon, it seems justices are choosing the law over Trump and his Mafia Don style tactics. He throws everybody under the bus after throwing them out of the nest. So I don't really know why he would expect this to be any different, but it's okay. He'll have Tapioca be his mouthpiece and get him in trouble while Trump gets to remain generally scot-free and doesn't have to discuss this after being sworn in. So I think it is not going to be lost on the jurors that he's not there to defend himself. There could be the thought that people will go, this is such a pushover. This is such a weak case. He doesn't even need to sully his hands with this whatsoever. It's beneath him. It's peasant-ish. So he's not going to care. That's one way of thinking it. The other way is my way of thinking it, that he doesn't want to be guilty of perjury. He's so afraid of this case. Granted, it is a civil case, but he's so scared of it, he doesn't want to be there to get himself in trouble. He just gets himself in trouble on social media instead. What he is doing is he's decided to go off to Scotland to take a look at the golf courses that he has there. And I believe he's even breaking ground on another one. And there was some video footage of him all dressed up in a fatty, puffy coat with a hat. And they were breaking some ground on a new golf course. So he tried to highlight that he had a lovely welcome when he got there in Scotland. And that it's his mother's home country. And he said, good to be home. And it is true. His mother is from Scotland. She had a MacLeod last name. God, that does a great disservice to the Highlander movies, I'll tell you that. But he was like, oh, Scotland was great and these people are welcoming me and everything. Meanwhile, astute paying attention to the videos of him walking out of his jet onto a red carpet and having bagpipes playing, people found out that this is a company called ABBA. Professional Scottish Entertainment. They are bagpipers that can be hired for services and weddings. So ABBA Bagpipes, established in 2010. There's their flag. These are the people who were playing bagpipes for Trump when he descended the staircase. Chances are they were hired by Trump and Trump's organization to be there. I do not think it is the case that somebody in Scotland was so pro-Trump that they hired this company for him to give him a good reception. It is more than likely that he hired them himself for the photo op. You could believe what you're going to believe on that one. Again, I'm not here to tell you my way is right. Based on previous experience and seeing what this man does, I believed his own organization hired these people and not Scottish people who were just so happy to see him. This over here on Scotsman.com, which is a Scottish paper, has said that he's arrived. It's great to be home. This was the home of my mother. A reminder of something many people in Scotland worked hard to forget. So while the populist Trump does appear to be a fan of ideals expressed in Mi Casa Su Casa, it seems to be in the favor of Mama Casa Mi Casa, which might be a bit rich considering his track record. This paper was not very pro-Trump in their representation of the event whatsoever. So while he should be in court defending himself to the utmost of his ability, if he was in fact completely innocent of all charges, being the actual event and then the subsequent defamation of E. Jean Carroll in retelling the event, he should be there. I would say that under every circumstance, if I was going to prove my innocence, I absolutely would be trying to 100% of my ability to prove that I am innocent by any and every means necessary. Denying showing up in court and then visibly going to a rally in New Hampshire and then flying off to Scotland, which could potentially raise the flight risk concerns, but I'm sure he cannot avoid being away from the States for a particularly long period of time. From a public relations perspective, from an optics perspective, none of this looks good for Trump. The only way this looks good for Trump is if you think the charges are so frivolous and so without merit and so easily crapped on that this is all peasantry level stuff. He doesn't need to sully his hands with it. He could just send errand boy Tapioca to go take care of it while he takes care of the bigger, more important stuff, and this is no sweat off the man's brow. That is the opposing viewpoint to this. It is up to you to decide whether you believe in that or he is simply in a lot of trouble in this and just simply not facing it. It's the Political Napalm, signing off. Have a great day.